So this is exciting. Ben is a city councilman in Berkeley, and he's going to talk about a recent project that has created permanent supportive housing, but it's full of biometrics to support people's health. And on our left, Kristen and Philip. Now this is an odd couple. We have a behavioral economist and a property developer, and you guys have created quite some jazz because you've brought that discipline to how you look at community. So maybe you, and I think we have some slides for you that I can go over here and run, but maybe you can start about how these two disciplines came together and inspired you to start looking for community, and then I'll go over there and run your slides.
Great. Do you want to?
Yeah, so I think the story of what we're going to talk about here is really what happens when a behavioral scientist falls in love with a real estate developer. And what ends up happening then is you do a lot of experiments in housing, experiments on yourselves, on your kids, and on your friends. And I think we're going to share sort of over the next 25 minutes some of those experiments. And one of the places we'll probably talk about, one of the experiments, is the place we live right now, which is a place called Radish in Oakland. Here are the people that live there. Here we go, next slide. And so what Radish is it's a cluster of homes. There are 10 homes spread across 6 buildings, and it houses 20 of our friends and now 8 kids who all have been born there. And so this is our home, and it's a giant experiment in how one might live. And really this is possible because I like building things, and Kristen likes thinking about behavior and happiness.
Yeah, and so we do have the adults and the kids at this point. And I think one of the hacks here is, how do you solve for happiness? So does anyone know what drives happiness? Money. Just kidding, it's not money, it's a lot of money. That's a joke too. It's relationships. So we're at Human+Tech Week, of course it's relationships. And so the question as a behavioral scientist we ask is, how do we get better at relationships? How do you get more relationships and quality relationships? If you want to skip slides. We'll come back to this idea in a second. And so as a behavioral scientist, there's one common law, which is make it easy. And Phil and I joke it's the iron law of proximity. If you want somebody to do something, you need to make it easy. And so the question becomes is, how do you make relationships easy? By the way, next slide. If you really want to do anything in your life, making it easy is the thing. If you want to be on your phone less, you should move the phone away from you. If you want to eat less, you should move the snacks away from you. If you want to exercise more, you should move the gym closer to you. So this is the essence of decision making, and the essence of behavior change is around making it easy. And so for us, it was very clear, if we want to drive happiness, we need to make relationships easier. How do you make relationships easier? We just have to make it easier to be by the people that we care about. And so Radish is an experiment in driving happiness by living by the people that we care about. Yep, and so that's my shtick, is that how do you design the world that you're in by driving happiness? And Phil?
Yeah, and a little of my background is, so I worked on a real estate development called Culdesac in Tempe, Arizona. And we were trying to create car-free walkable communities. And one of the things you can do when you remove cars from the physical living environment is that can create a lot more space for social connection. And so Culdesac is sort of, Culdesac sort of built around this idea that instead of walking out of your home and going into a garage, you're going to walk out of your home and go into a courtyard that you share with your neighbors. And so here's some pictures of Culdesac. It's about half built now. There's going to be 1,000 people living there pretty soon. I think what we're finding is it's becoming like a real place for social connection in Phoenix, where that doesn't, often happen that easily. Maybe something else we can also talk about is I've now started a company called Live Near Friends, and we're sort of helping to extend this idea to more places. And Live Near Friends is about helping people live right next door to their friends and family. And we think this is one of the greatest single things you can do for your health and happiness and sense of connection. Is just move one person who you care about next door to you. And so yeah, in summary, we think about essentially the iron law of proximity, which is from behavioral science, which is the things near you are the things that you will do, and the things far are the things that you won't do, and how we use our housing to actually bring the things closer to us that make us happy, healthy, and more connected.
Phil, a car-free community in Arizona in the American West is the most unlikely of things, it seemed. How was it as you approached this, did you think this was going to be a good idea, and what did the investors think?
Yeah, so getting new ideas in real estate funded is never easy. Getting a car-free community built in the notoriously most car-choked place in the United States was definitely hard. I think we saw a couple things, right? So one is there is a data point out there, which is if you survey people and you ask them, do you want to prioritize living in a walkable community? 2/3 of people in America will say yes, that is a very high priority for me. So guess the number of people that actually live in a walkable community. It's about 7%. So essentially we just saw this big giant gap between what people said they want and basically what the market was delivering to them in terms of the environments we live in. And so I think, there's just like enough evidence that there was the demand for this. Like, our walkable places in the United States are the most valuable real estate in the country, that we thought, let's just go manufacture some more walkability. And we can even do that in a place like Phoenix. And one of the reasons we did this in Phoenix is that is where Waymo got started. And so, what's an easy way to have a community without a car? Well, if you're in a place where there's a lot of self-driving cars. And so, like, there's a reason Culdesac started in 2018 and not 2010. It was really built in the idea that mobility is changing, and it's making it less likely, or it's making it more possible to live without your own personal vehicle. And so it's an experiment in how we think real estate should be developed in a world where mobility is on demand and shared as opposed to one person, one car.
And Kristen, I have a question for you. It's kind of a two-part thing. One, okay, well, you're a behavioral scientist, and you could have done what many of them did, designing better Amazon shopping experiences or end caps, but you ended up in the happiness business. Like, how did that flip?
Yeah, so a theory in behavior change is, again, that the environment changes our behavior. So if something on the website that you were just at is different, you would behave differently. We sometimes think that our attitudes, our preferences, and our beliefs drive our behavior, but instead this environment of decision-making does. And so if you apply that to tech, it's very easy to see. You change a button, you change behavior. And I think the real light bulb is when you can change your built environment. And if you change your built environment, you can change behavior. And so I run a consulting company, and we do work with these tech companies to help people behave in different ways for good. And then in my personal life, we have this experiment in happiness where we've changed our built environment. And I think it's really empowering to think that if you can change your own built environment, you can change your own happiness. That it's not about willpower or just self-control. It's about how do you design the things around you to drive the behavior that you want to see.
And this community, you use the term multiplayer housing, but this thing you've built, is there something about this moment that makes that happen because we're either lonely after the pandemic, or demographics have changed, or families have changed?
Actually, so Lauren in the audience was living with us during COVID, and so it definitely did bring people together. It was an obvious kind of light bulb I think most of us had, that people are helpful. I think this moment in time probably is a zoning moment as well, where we were able to build more housing because of the laws being changed.
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. So I think there's a few things pushing people towards more isolation, and they're craving the other thing. So technology is pushing us to more isolation at times. Remote work is pushing us to more isolation, and so I think they're craving the opposite. And I think another thing is especially in a place like the Bay Area, raising families is particularly difficult. It's like really expensive to have a house that's large enough for a family, and then you have to pay for childcare on top of that, and then both parents have to work because it's so expensive to have those things, and then you have to take care of your kids too, and the whole equation just sort of doesn't work. And so I think a lot of the demand we see to live at a place like Radish, and there's a lot of demand, is people who want to make raising kids easier. And our environment has made raising kids really difficult, which is why in San Francisco there's more dogs than kids.
Yeah.
We've just made it really hard to raise a kid here. And I think Radish is sort of an experiment in saying, what would it look like to create an environment where raising kids was as easy as it could possibly be? And it's nothing more complicated than you have a neighbor next door to watch your kid for 10 minutes while you go to the store. or watch your baby monitor all night while you go out and have dinner with a friend. And it's like that one change can radically change your experiment as a parent, your experience as a parent.
One final question before we go on to Ben. Tell us about veto-ocracy versus do-ocracy, because that sounds an awful lot like our government in San Francisco.
So a lot of times when you hear that you have 20 people living together, people get fearful about, well, how do you make decisions? What's the governance? And I think there's a few nice insights that we've had throughout the years, and I think a big one is do-ocracy. And so you can apply this, we apply it in our Radish, but you can apply it in your companies as well. It's just people can do anything without asking for permission. And the obvious thing you think you want in a group like this is consensus. You want to weigh in on something. But actually what people want is not to have meetings, not to have to decide with other people, and just to do the thing. So at Radish, you can do anything that's reversible. So it's social permission. You do not have to ask anyone if you want to move a couch, if you want to paint a wall, if you want to have a party. It has to be reversible. Or at least not, don't be an asshole kind of still applies. But this allows people to do a lot without having typical governance. And we think that probably bureaucracy is the death of most happiness. And so this is a nice hack.
Look, Ben, all this experimentation going on in Alameda County, right nearby, and here you are. So you're both a developer and a councilman and someone into tech. Talk a little bit about the vision you had and what we just saw that culminated this week. And I've got some slides when you want to see that.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for having me here. Really an honor to be here. And your presentation is wonderful. I love it. Living with friends, living next to friends. Sounds great. I really want to learn more. So essentially, recently you came to the ribbon cutting for our building. It's called Step Up Housing, and it's a 10-year culmination of getting beyond bureaucracy. And I think that's going to be my autobiography, Beyond Bureaucracy. Ben Bartlett, Beyond Bureaucracy. B. So essentially, a number of years ago, almost 10 years, we had a few deaths in the street happen from exposure. These are homeless people. It was the first inkling of the homeless crisis we're in now, and it was starting to manifest, and we had a couple of deaths. And we looked around and said, okay, well, how can we get at this issue? And so over time, we realized that, okay, to make housing for them is difficult and expensive. It costs like $1 million an apartment now to build here. To get the services people need is even more expensive and more difficult. And to make it feasible in any kind of financial sense with building models and everything else is extraordinarily difficult. And so we decided to go at it the difficult way and create a new building format with new materials, new prefabrication, new elements, advanced design, bring in a service provider, bring in a medical component, most importantly. And the medical component is what drives the value and the change, and also increases the likelihood of adoption and further expanding. Because you have to realize that at the same time you see these people in the street, you're witnessing 50 years of, one, not building housing, so there's scarcity, not building mental health infrastructure, there's no mental health facilities, hospital deserts emergent, a super deficit in healthcare providers, nurses, almost no community healthcare workers, few doctors, and this massive need. Memory care, elderly, drug addiction, you name it. So what we did was layered in a telemedical interface into the model where each person is sort of granted a biometric medical service to do like a check engine light going on all the time. And
here's an example of one of them.
Yeah, here's one of them. Cherish, they're a great group. And so this little innocuous speaker here is actually a sophisticated radar system that can read your heart rate, read your fluids, read your pressure. It records 15 seconds of sound a day, and with that recording, they can determine other aspects of your mental health, your bone density, everything. It's really amazing. And we have a smart toilet that can scan your poop and your pee and determine what your kidneys are like.
There's your
everything's
toilet.
like. Yeah, there it is. There it is. So, in this really simple, low-tech, subscription-based model is so just basic, but it makes such a huge delta in someone's life, because the check engine light approach, this upstream, non-invasive, non-therapeutic, just alert system, aligned with a community healthcare worker, a low-income person, to just check on you and see if you're taking your medicine today and how you're feeling, is way more effective than any doctor, any hospital. And so this is our effort. It took 10 years to get through the zoning and all the financing and everything else, and now we have a mold set to be recast.
You know, when I was there the other day, I was struck by kind of what a joyful experiment it was. So here you had gotten through the 10 years of building this. There was this desire to put the biometric stuff in, and so I saw a number of products from a number of startups. I'm sure this is a reflection of the fact that you have a foot in the startup community, a foot in the community, so you kind of invited them all in. And then I saw a bunch of researchers from UC Berkeley, health people there. And I'm like, I get it. This is a collaboration between the homeless, between health researchers and startups with tech to see what happens. And I gather that people don't really know, right? So there's monitoring technology. We have to see. That was the very day, by the way, that some of the formerly homeless moved in and then learned and had a conversation about privacy and what was going to. Tell me how that went, right? Because here's this new technology, and you're like, welcome home, there's some radar here.
Yeah, so essentially, and this building was built in 6 months, not 3 years, at a third of the price. And it's super high quality, state of the art, really wonderful living experience. It's designed for a community, much like you're talking about, where the people have to be with each other and support each other in order to step up and get back on your feet. And so in every element of this, because it went against the grain and broke the bureaucracy, it was a for-profit developer, it had technology, it used new building materials, it went against every single status quo element, so they resisted it. But they failed, we won, and now we are here. So this other element, the telemedical component, is the way it's offered is like, when you sign the lease, the tenant, they have the option to participate or not. And so it's a really simple process. And so the goal is to give it to half the unit, and in 6 months we'll check their health status versus those who refuse. And we'll see what happens. So I think we will know, though, because any intervention is always super successful.
You know, there's an interesting trend here. I talked earlier that when smart cities got started, they applied the Internet of Things for efficiency purposes. The traffic and the elevators run better. And now we're beginning to see we can use that same stuff for flourishing. Right, and then here's Kristen, who was a behavioral economist and probably should have been working on e-commerce, but applied it to happiness. And now here are all of these devices, and the first generation of these things, maybe individuals were biohacking, or maybe we're using for efficiency, but now we're bringing it together with social service and researchers. You can see how we're entering kind of that new era. I see we're about to move on to our next panel, so maybe we have audience questions before we move on. Yes, back there. I guess someone needs a microphone.
Appreciate it, guys, especially how relationships are the foundations for happiness. What's your opinion on co-housing, and how can we see more co-living projects gain traction here in the Bay Area?
Radish is essentially a co-housing project. I'm a professional real estate developer. It was still incredibly difficult to do for me. I don't think we've made it easy enough to build any sort of experimental housing, let alone co-housing here. And to do so is to take on just an incredible amount of risk right now. And I think people are responding rationally, which is not doing it. I think we need to make the rules. We need a lot more duocracy in the system, whereas if an individual wants to take on a low-risk experiment on a plot of land, they're allowed to do so. And maybe even the opposite of what happens now, they're actually supported rather than blocked from doing that. So I think it's just a big cultural shift in how we think about what is allowed and things being default allowed rather than default not allowed. And as long as it's default not allowed, we're not going to see very much of it.
What's next? Well, I guess this vision of health innovation and housing and real estate it needs to expand because, Americans are woefully unhealthy. We're staying in the house all the time, as you mentioned, and we're super obese, we're insane, we're unhealthy. So now it's time to really bring healthcare to the masses, and this is the way to do it.
These are all great examples of why really good ideas start on the left coast. I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah, one more question, just to follow up on, we're talking to, we have a city council member here in Berkeley who's very, very pro-housing and very interested in, enabling and empowering projects that are really healthy for community. So, Ben, what would you say about, like in terms of like politics and how the sausage is made that you know all about and all this struggle and difficulty, how easy it might be with current like legislations and like YIMBY and abundance like.
You're asking how easy it is to navigate housing given the politics involved.
Going
You're a
forward,
politician, so
going forward.
Listen, good people are talk a lot about wealth inequality, income inequality, but the greatest space of wealth in the world is land. And so a lot of good liberals are land hoarders. And Berkeley created zoning, by the way. It was called race zoning, and we created it, and so now we're undoing it. We're actually going to vote on it next week to undo the single-family zone once for all and allow proliferation of what they call density, which is homes of non-rich people. So democracy, the economy, our well-being all depend on zoning reform. And the reason why California is the poorest state in the country and the richest, and has the 49th out of 50th reading scores and 50 out of 50 for housing affordability and #1 in homelessness is because of the lock on the land. The land hoarders must be forced to share the land. And that's it.
Well, that's a good setup for the rest of this talk. Thank you very much. Give it up for the experimentalists. Okay.